here to talk about a proposed addition to this fire station and the consolidation of the fire district assets. The first thing that we need to bear in mind is that the fire district has absolutely nothing to do with the fire. Well, it is a separate entity from the fire department. The fire department is a group of volunteers that show up during the day, during the night, and responds to emergency calls. The fire district is a subdivision of the state of New York. We are charged with raising funds to support the department, setting policies for the department, and basically overseeing the general management of the district and the department. The project that we're talking about today is not a creature of the fire department, it is a creature of the fire district. This is not a new project contrary to what some people may have thought. In fact, in 2003, long before I got on the Board of Fire Commissioners, we commissioned a needs study from, in fact, Bob Mitchell, who is our architect on this project. We were actually in contract to buy this property for $2,050,000. We had to exit ourselves from that contract due to a deadline that we had, and upon discovery of some environmental problems, we found some contaminants in the soil and some contaminants in the building itself. We either had to dive in anyway, or we had to cancel that contract. We canceled it. Now we're back. In about April of 2015, we entered into a contract to purchase the property next door for a price of $1.75 million. It's complex because it's contractual, but after doing an environmental study next door, we found the contaminants were worse than we thought. We worked out a deal with the seller, and that purchase price has now gone down to 1.6 and change. We are going to be responsible for most of the abatement. The contract that we entered into provides very strict deadlines. We had a certain amount of time to do our environmentals. We got an extension on that. One thing that it does provide is that we have 18 months to go through the whole process. And for anyone who's been in front of the planning board and done this sort of secret review, you know that that's pretty fast. Our deadline for going out to a vote is in October. And if we don't get that, we are out of the contract. We believe we're in the final stages of getting the planning board approval. We've been working with them since last April. We've had a number of meetings with them, both at Town Hall, both up here. We're working very well together. They've made suggestions on our site plan and our design, some of which we've incorporated, some of which we have not. But we've done the best that we can to accommodate them. And that's why we're here. For those people that don't know, the fire district owns 3 properties. The taxpayers of the fire district own 3 properties. We own this building right here, and we own the building down Center Street, which is across from the recreational center, and we own the parking lot across the street. The Center Street Firehouse, which is down at the bottom of the hill by the rec center, was built in 1924. The building that we're sitting in right now was built in 1954, and then in addition, the lower bays over there was added in the 70s. As you can see, the space constraints here are rather severe, but not as severe as the ones down at Center Street. Center Street is obsolete for the purposes of turning out for fire responses. I've heard one comment over the past couple of weeks, wow, this is awfully big, do they really need 8 bays? The fact of the matter is we have 7 bays right now. The problem is 2 of them are not functional and 2 more are about to become less functional, if at all. That's these 2. Because the archways and over time, fire apparatus has gotten bigger, it's gotten taller. There are increased emission standards that we have to meet. We've lobbied the federal government for exemption to those standards, and that's been denied. Right now, down at the bottom of the hill, at Center Street, we have a utility van, we have an antique engine pumper, we have a hose carriage, and we have a boat. And upstairs, we have a fitness room and storage space. We're hoping to move all that up here. And my personal belief is that we ought to sell Center Street at that point because it serves no purpose for the taxpayers of the district. And if we can put everything in one place, we think it will be able to provide better fire service to our constituents. Now, one thing that we have to do is we need to bring this building up to code. Once we touch dirt and once we touch brick, we now have to bring ourselves into compliance. You will notice there is no sprinkler system in this building. We should have one fire guidelines. You will notice, for example, there's a room next door here. That's the fire commissioner's meeting room. We meet once a month. It's usually the second Thursday every month. We meet there in October and September to set a budget, which determines how much we're going to levy on you as taxes. We meet there for elections. If you come to this building in a wheelchair and you need to use the restroom, we're going to have to get someone to lift you down in your wheelchair, wheel you across the floor, and then lift you back up. We are not ADA compliant. This building is not conducive to public use. We have a large room upstairs. You may notice the van outside. Part of the ceiling came down. We have some asbestos. It's not dangerous. It's not creating dust. But we think we ought to clear that up, just like the contaminants next door. They're not at the level at which we need to do anything, but if we purchase that property, we intend to clean it and cart it away. What we would like, or what we were talking about, is doing with this building what Armand did with theirs, and to some extent Millwood with theirs. We'd like this to become truly a public building. It's difficult for us to do that right now because if we allow outside groups to use that big room upstairs, we have no way to secure the rest of the apartment or the rest of the structure. In other words, people could wander downstairs, they could wander into areas where they could get hurt or where apparatus could get damaged. The fire department responds to anywhere in the neighborhood of 450 fire calls a year. Almost half of those are false alarms, automatic alarms. Sometimes it's contractors that forget to cover up the detectors when they're working and whatnot. This poses a problem to the fire service. Over time, you know, we're like the rats in the cage pushing the button and we're not getting any food. At some point, we stop pushing the button. And that's what happens to us. Sometimes a volunteer who might otherwise be inclined to respond to a call, he sees on his page that's an automatic alarm. He knows that building, those homeowners, they pay their $50 fine. They don't care. They don't fix the problem. There are false alarms there all the time. That person, he or she, is not going to respond. So we need to do something else to try to draw volunteers into this building by making it more comfortable. These two trucks, if you can imagine these two trucks being placed in these bays, will come back to about here. All right? Now these turnout gear racks are generally here. When we have a storm, when we have a full complement of personnel, it's hard to move around. It creates safety issues, and it's, you know, it's not an ideal situation. Moreover, the fires that we have today are different than the fires that we had 100 years ago. When people are coming out of a burning building, they're not coming out of the Chappaqua Meeting House. We're not talking about wood smoke. We're not talking about just basic paint. We're talking about plastics. We're talking about carcinogens. And right now, the carcinogens that are sitting on that jacket are not isolated from the apparatus, and they're not isolated in their own space. We'd like to do that. Bob's going to talk about that a little bit more. So that's sort of the background of the project and where we've been. Thank you for coming back again. We had a public meeting last March that was not as well attended as this one. But I'm going to turn this over now to Bob Mitchell, who is our architect. He's going to walk us through where we are and where we're going.
Thank you very much. So I'm Bob Mitchell, Mitchell Associates Architects. All my firm does is design fire stations. We've been involved with over 200, and hope we've learned something. So these are pictures of the kinds of conditions Chris was talking about, the tight spaces which are, in addition to being inconvenient, or unsafe. The NFPA, which is the National Fire Prevention Association, has recommended clearances. The Air Force has recommended clearances. Different cities that publish standards would like to see 8 foot clear between trucks, and I'll show you what that ends up looking like. Something like that. Okay, trucks are much larger than they were at the time that this building was built, and I think somewhere along the way I'll show you a picture of that evolution and why. If at the end of this, I think you'd be welcome to walk around, and you'll see that this is the kind of storage that we have, and this is the kind of storage that ought to be there. Okay, there should never be, we have a little mantra, there's nothing on the floor but tires and feet. There are trip hazards all around the building. Most of them were cleared up because you guys were coming, and I think if we can open this, Chief, can you open this door, or is it unlocked? Okay, so that's all the stuff. Because it's all little storage, that room doesn't even work as a storage room if everything that is on the floor here is put away. But, so we want to cure that. There have been fatalities in other fire stations due to trip hazards. At the time the alarm goes off, there's a lot of adrenaline, there's a lot of rushing. People can fall, the driver of the truck might not realize it. And so one of my clients in particular, someone was killed by being run over in his own station. This is the self-contained breathing air fill station, which is further on in the building. It's supposed to be in a clean space like that. These are the masks that go on people's faces that are processed in this room. The air bottles are processed in that room. As you were being told a moment ago, there are carcinogens that come back on the masks, on the clothing, on the firefighters wear headgear, a soft headgear under their helmet. It's called balaclava. There's a high incidence of cancer in this part of their throats for particles that are small at the fire scene, small enough to make it through fabric. They make it actually through the turnout gear, through the skin, into the fatty tissue. Firefighters will tell you that for days after fighting a fire, they continue to smell like a fire. So we're trying to make sure that we have the ability to treat everything that is in a clean, sanitary way, that the turnout gear is not left out here. You can't necessarily see, but it's a very small distance from that turnout gear rack to the back of the truck. So the people are, you can imagine it's a little bit clumsy putting on that kind of a suit, and it's being done in close proximity to the truck that's starting up and getting ready to go. There should be separate spaces. This is an older picture. The way we do these now, there's actually a door at the end. This is a hermetically sealed room because you come back from the fire with these garments contaminated. And until such time as you get to decontaminate them, you have to treat them as contaminated. And they should be in a separate space so that the things that evaporate off of them do not get into the airstream. You may or may not know that cancer rates amongst firefighters are more than twice the national average. And for certain cancers, they're as much as 5 times the national average. So we take very seriously decontamination. There is none of this right now at the station. Okay, so that the gear can be, if you can't readily decontaminate the gear and put it back in the service, you can end up hanging it back up dirty. That takes space to do. This is what's going on for storage. These are not proper. Okay, so what are proper spaces? This is a proper radio room, communication room. And this is what goes on here because it doesn't, actually this is office space here. And, in a modern fire service, there's a lot of paperwork to do. There's reports after each event. There's HIPAA forms to take care of. There's inventories. There's reporting on the condition of the trucks and the equipment. All of these things have to be done, and they require office space to do it. You need a space where you can have meetings. The chief often has to talk to somebody and straighten them out or find out what's bothering them. There's no private room around here to do that. This is what's called a day room. These are the firefighters, if you want, what the department really wants is for the firefighters to feel that this is their home and to hang out here. Because your response time to a fire is going to be significantly improved if the people who are going to the fire are at the station at the time the alarm goes off. Okay, there's lots of calculations that are done of the drive time once the truck exits the building and goes to the scene of the fire. And there are ISO standards about how quickly you should get there. But what's equally important is how long it takes for the firefighters to get to the station, to get their turnout gear on, get into the truck, and then exit the station. So anything we can do to improve that improves life safety.
Yeah, just so we bounced at ISO, ISO stands for the Insurance Services Office. This is an organization that creates ratings on fire protection. When everybody in this room bought their homeowner's policy to cover their house, the first question they were asked probably after their name was, how far are you from a fire hydrant? The second question was probably, how far are you from a fire station? And right now we have 2 different ISO ratings in this particular district. The lower number is the better number. We're 4 out of 9, centrally located. Some of the outer areas of our district do not have hydrants, which means our trucks have to be designed and built to carry hose. That means they have to be bigger. When we get outside of our 4 and 9, we're much higher. I don't remember exactly what the number is. Do you, Mr. Monica? You know what our is? It's 9? 9. We do get credits for some other things. And just on that topic, before we move on, the suggestion has also been raised, well, why don't you build a fire station up at Chapel Crossing? Why don't you buy some other piece of land and start from scratch instead of doing an addition and trying to remediate some of the problems that we have here? Not only would that probably be a lot more expensive, but it would affect the response time. I am not a firefighter. The Board of Fire Commissioners, by tradition, is a board of 5. It's composed of 3 firefighters and 2 non-firefighters. At present, myself and Commissioner Nancy says I stand in the back of the non-firefighters. So we don't really have to die in this fight. The other 3 are. And the firefighters in the room will tell you that when you're dealing with an involved fire, response time is critical. Not only is it the difference between life and death, it's also can be the difference between saving and losing structure. When we had the house up in Ivy Hill a number of years ago, it was fully involved over the garage, they were able to save it. Mostly because they got there quickly, and mostly because mutually they got there quickly as well. In 2013, the fire district contracted for a study by a group called Emergency Vehicle Response. This is what these people do, is they go out and they evaluate and make recommendations with respect to call volume, station needs, apparatus needs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They issued a 2-part report. It's on our website, one dealing with apparatus and one dealing with the station. They had a number of recommendations. With respect to the station, they suggested we put in 5 to 6 drive-through bays in order to accommodate the trucks that we're going to have to bring in. We didn't do that. We thought we could do it with less. Between 3 operational bays down there and 3 more, we thought we would be fine. Our oldest piece of apparatus right now is sitting outside that door. Well, not including the antique from 1937. The rescue was built in the 1980s. In 1997, it started out as an engine. In I believe 97, the chassis was changed over to a rescue. But most people will tell you it will be useful life of a piece of fire apparatus between 15 and 20 years as a first due response piece of apparatus, and maybe getting 5 years as a second due. The average age of our equipment, not including our utilities and our chief's cars, is 18 years. So that's sort of where we are. The newest piece of apparatus we have is engine 144. We had an engine 145 that was taken out of service and not replaced. The reason I mention this is because we're going to need to replace that thing soon. And we're at a point where we have to design a truck that will fit in the building, rather than design a truck that the chiefs and our trucks committee feels is what is best suited to provide adequate protection to the district. In other words, because of the infrastructure we're working with, we find ourselves in a position where we may have to compromise fire protection. That doesn't mean that our firefighters are not going to do the best they can with what they have. However, we think that the taxpayers of our district deserve, and the visitors deserve better. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay, so these are the kinds of spaces that are common in a modern fire station. A bathroom that's large enough to be accessible, an exercise room. Cardiac arrest is the single largest cause of death of fires and for firefighters. So the NFPA actually mandates that you have a physical fitness program, and you need to have room for the equipment to do that. And then bunking, the EVR report that Chris mentioned had suggested that we have the capability to bunk at least 8 people in the building. And I want to talk a little bit about what that means. This is not a career department at this time. What we do in this project will be here for 100 years. Okay, a lot of people talk about the lifespan of a building. I mean, this building was done in the 50s, so it's 65 years old. It's perfectly sound. There's nothing wrong with it physically. What's wrong with it is it's technically obsolete. So if we can design a building that is robust like this, that we can anticipate what the future needs are so that it will not be obsolete. I'll talk a little bit about that because planners always pretend they know what the future has, right? So, but I'm going to try and convince you that we have some good ideas about what the future has to say about fire station. That building can be a permanent building. And if we detail the materials on the skin of the building to be robust against the effects of weather, and you have that here already, mostly it's brick on the inside, the building can last as long as the community has a need for the building, which is a very different thing from what is my, everybody who comes to me and needs a new fire station is because their station's obsolete. Otherwise they wouldn't come to me. And the vast majority of the fire stations in the United States are obsolete. Now, in a moment or two I'll explain that. I have a diagram to explain it. Integral training in the building. The firefighters do very complicated and dangerous things. This fella here is being trained to jump face first, head first, out of the window, onto the ladder. Catch himself, turn himself around, and go down feet first. That's it. There's a flashover in the space. Okay? The firefighters need to train for confined space extrication. There's a series of exercises called masked confidence and entanglement. Picture yourself, if you're at all claustrophobic, imagine yourself with all this gear on and hoses to your breathing air, and you're crawling through a blacked out building, and you can't see beyond here, and something catches on your hose. What are you going to do? So we have to be able to mimic this kind of thing, and let these people have the self-confidence to work their way out of the entanglement and proceed with what they're doing. Those things need to be in the building. You can't wait until you go to the county training center because you won't get enough training done. People need to be able to talk to their superior in the department and say, I'm uncomfortable doing X, and then they can say, okay, let's create a training exercise. That's one. Two, if the people are in the building training instead of over at the county training center, they're here if the alarm goes off. And response time is, well, they say that fires double in size, what is it, every 4 minutes, or is it faster than that? Any of you can remember the number? Something like that. So that's what we're up against. Training rooms, there's going to be a training room, which I'll go through, a meeting training room, which will be available for public purpose and fully accessible. And, this is just a picture of one from another project. And all these are pictures from another project, right, because we haven't built this yet. But they're demonstrative of what will be here. We mentioned already the issues, Chris mentioned the issues of ADA compliance. The building should not be, it's a public building, it's an essential facility. The building should be easily accessible to people and should be robust enough to be the last thing standing in an emergency. So, okay, and part of accessibility, and both in terms of code compliance for wheelchairs, but just in terms of inviting for people. Chris talked about the difficulty of isolating the visitors from the active guts of the building. You'll see that we're able to do that in the design. And then modern energy efficient equipment. Everything that's going to be in the building will be of the highest caliber in terms of efficiency and durability. Okay, so there we are. So where are we today? We started with something called programming, which I'll describe a little bit, but that's what we would consider user needs analysis. That was the first thing we did. We developed a schematic design, which you can see over there on the boards. What comes next is, after you approve this project, assuming you do, we'll go into further development of the drawings, called design development, and then the construction documents, with the thought of going out to bid for construction in the spring. We'll bid the job, and then it'll be built over about a 14-month period. So this is what's been done so far, programming and schematic design in terms of architect services. In conjunction with that, we've been at the planning board, Chris said, since April, and this coming Tuesday is the public hearing, and you're all invited to see, I think it's our final step with the planning board. We're thinking spring for bidding and completion in the summer of 2018. Now the work is going to be phased so that we can continue to operate out of this building because there is no alternative place. So that's a complexity that we're having to work through. Okay, this is the size of a fire truck at the time that this building was built. This is the size of a contemporary fire truck. Okay, instead of 250 square feet of an area, it requires something like 750, and that's what a ladder truck requires. I think, I'm sorry, the numbers don't show up, it's supposed to, but anyway, 250, 750, 950, yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay. So the new trucks are larger, but are they serving communities in the Bronx or New York City? What's the typical size, like in Thornwood, Valhalla? You know, how does that compare?
This truck, this is not a New York City truck. The New York City trucks are smaller for reasons that have to do with tight corners. And also they don't carry as much equipment. The city will send a different kind of vehicle out carrying jaws of life if they need it, or lifting equipment if a vehicle's turned over and they have to jack it up to get under it enough to get somebody out. These guys have to go with everything. So the things that have affected the size of trucks, between NFPA and OSHA in the 1980s, it was decided that the firefighters have to be in the cab. They can't, remember how they used to hang off the back? And then in the intermediate step, they sat up behind the cab and there was a moving arm like that. They were out in the weather. They decided that this was not acceptable anymore. So the cabs became significantly larger. Firefighter has to be able to be in the cab, seated, with a seatbelt on, with his air pack on, and all of that stuff. So the cabs became taller and wider. And then the EPA required that there be secondary catalytic converter with urea injectors, okay, which fit under the floor of that cab. So that raised the floor, raising the whole thing all over again. So these doors that you see here are 10 feet, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, 10 feet tall. The doors now are 14 feet tall. Okay, now the trucks are really just...
Actually, the arches here are 112, so we're talking about 9.3 feet.
Okay, at the lowest point. The trucks right now are hardly over 13 feet because of so many bridges and road underpasses. And every community that I work in, there's all this conversation about where you can go with the truck and how you have to get around it because there's something too low to get under. So that's why the trucks are the size they are. Does I finish that? No, take that. The other thing is there are these compartments on the side of the trucks that carry all these things like the jaws of life and the lifting equipment and cribbing and all sorts of things like that. And Barry, if I've said any of that incorrectly, Barry's a career firefighter in the city.
Greenberg, thank you.
Am I'm pretty good on that?
Yes.
Okay.
In light of what this gentleman just said, is it you have to take into consideration in this town, the areas that it's servicing and the houses that are, I drive the ambulance myself, so I know firsthand how many driveways in this town, big trucks will never get into fight fires at those people's homes. I think you have to take into consideration that maybe you do need a truck or two that fits in a building like this because that's the only kind of vehicle that's going to fit in those driveways. The driveways, when I go down with the ambulance, I've got this much room on each side, and the ambulance is a lot smaller than the fire trucks that you're talking about.
Do you want to talk to that?
And it's not like you're a short driveways, you've got long driveways, so a truck out on the street's not going to put the fire out in those homes. And
Understood.
that's what we have in this town now.
Right. Chief, can somebody from the department talk to that?
Yeah, the comment is correct. It varies depending on.
Greg,
Yeah,
folks, this is
comments
Greg
are
Maloney.
correct.
He's the chief.
There's some areas,
This is Greg Maloney, he's the chief of the department.
there are some areas that you just can't really get in, you really have to improvise. They're very tight. In fact, they just built some new houses on King Street. I went up those driveways right down the block from here, and they're really tight. Maybe you're gonna have a couple of vehicles in there, there's gonna be a lot to maneuver, firefighters and stuff like that.
Maybe what is the mix of trucks? Are they going to be a mix of the smaller and...
Well, here's the thing, I was immediately thinking about the ladder, which will probably replace in a few years. That's a 75-foot ladder. We used to have 100, and we didn't think we needed 100. Kisco's got 100, Pleasantville's got 100 foot. And because they need it, they have more commercial. But the problem we have now, it's like a balance. We have these small houses, small driveways. Some of these driveways we can get a ladder in, a lot of them we can. Some of them we can't. But then we have a lot of commercial stuff going on. The Flores was, they're going to be building there, and we already looked at those plans, and we know we won't be able to get to the top, but we'll be able to at least cover the residents. They're also in the Cupola building, in Reader's Digest now. the 75-foot ladder, John, I think is probably not gonna do it. They're gonna put they're actually renovating, gutting that out right now, they're putting 67 apartments in there, units in there. They're gonna keep the outside the same. So it's a balance, and the next time we buy a ladder, we're gonna have to actually buy a 100-foot ladder. You go to the Bell School and we put up that 75-foot, you could just about get to the top floors. Yeah, just about. So it changed, actually. We had 100, then we went to 75, and now it's shifting again because of the commercial. Primarily, I would think because of some of the commercial stuff that's about to go on now.
Chief, are you saying that you used to have 100-foot?
Yeah, we used to have a straight, if you go down later on, we used to have a
Into
straight
this
tip.
building?
Yeah, it was a long and it was
In
a
that
low building.
Oh, in that building?
Yeah, the difference with that is a straight tip. This has now we're pretty much, we've been buying you go all around town, very few, different towns, very few have a straight tip. They have a platform, there's a compartment, there's a box that sits in the back, you can look that firefighters get in. And you can.
When he says straight tip, it means the firefighter's walking up to the end of a ladder.
Yeah.
And all he has to work with is being at the end of a ladder. They put a basket for the firefighter to get.
So that increases the size. If you go down later on, you'll see considerably, you got the box in the back basically that fits 2 or 3 firefighters in.
Isn't it true that when there's a fire, that surrounding communities will also respond? So is it in a situation where you have a particular building and you know that, you're like, stretched to get to that particular site, then maybe Mount Kisco, which is close to the crossing, might respond. So, and so what I'm saying is, there's more houses here than buildings in Chappaqua.
Well, that's true. It's called mutual aid, and we are required to participate just like the surrounding towns are required to participate. And so, yes, if there's a specialized piece of apparatus, or if we need more manpower, or we don't have enough people on the trucks, we will call mutual aid, and they will show up, just as we will show up to that. However, that's not a substitute for, this came up when they were talking a number of years about duplicating services. Why does New Pleasantville, Newcastle, Millwood, Mount Kisco all need a fire department? Why don't we just have one fire department in the middle and off they go, and everyone will go, they have all the stuff that they need for this entire circle. The problem is that response time. It comes back to response time. When we had Ivy Hill down here, that house that was saved, if everybody was coming from Armonk, or if everybody was coming from Pleasantville, that would have delayed response times, but at least we were able to get a crew on scene immediately and start tamping down that event until our other support, our mutual aid from other towns arrived. Going back to the original point, maybe you can talk to this, because I mean, it's not my area, but someone at some point had said, if we get a small, say we get a small tanker, we get a small engine tanker that has to go, that can fit between these security gates that people put up, the landscaping that they put up, and they put them up without thinking about, what if there's a fire. We have a truck that's small enough to get down there. We still need to carry hose to get out. Some piece of apparatus is going to have to be down there that's got enough hose that can have, we do pump in stages on occasion too, right? We'll go from hydrant to engine to engine to,
We haven't done it for a while. There are some areas now that we would have had to have 3 engines in line, like East King Street. And I guess in Hardscrabble Road, because the water pressure is very low, or the last hydrant, and then that house is very far away. So you're talking about laying 5,000 feet of 5-inch hose. And now we've gone to tankers, but that's mutual aid. We don't have tankers. We don't have a tanker here. Eventually we'll get one, a small tanker. But most of East King Street, you have to Laurel Lane as a tanker. So as soon as you had mentioned if there's a fire, as soon as one of the chiefs says it's a 1075 truck, it's automatic. They start banging out. It's preset actually. So, and you'll get those tankers there. Same thing with ladders. Most of the time we'll use our ladder. I'll tell you, a couple of fires. I had a fire on Carolyn Place. There's been a couple. There've been 2 major ones in the last 10, I would say in the last 12 years. We used our ladder in one, and we used our ladder in Pleasantville's ladder in another one. And we got both, we actually got both ladders, it was 33 count.
And I think that's actually another important
Yeah.
point. The chiefs and the chief staff working together and the surrounding communities have plans for everything. It's mind-boggling what these folks can do. For example, Roaring Brook School, we know we're both
All the
responsible.
schools
We know that.
are dual response.
Dual response.
All the schools.
And we
Even
have,
on the other side of town, on the northern side.
ISO requires us, if we're going to provide community protection, community like this, we're required to have at least 2 engines in one ladder. That's under the ISO regs. With respect to the other things, I mean, if there is a motor vehicle accident, we know that the first due is going to be the rescue, and it's on the highway, so we know that the second due is going to be engine 14, help me? Six, thank you, Paul, thank you. Engine 146. You know, I mean, so then a lot of this stuff is automatic. We roll what has to be rolled first, depending on the type of call that it is. And these folks know that, I know it, I don't. But it's different pieces of equipment are also on different pieces of apparatus, and so we're targeting this. Go ahead, Larry. How about-
I'm sorry, I just want to clarify one thing on the ladder trucks. Everybody associates a 100-foot ladder truck or tower ladder with a 7-story building or so, where it's parked about 30 feet away from the building. In our situation, we don't have a lot of 7-story buildings in our area. I don't even know if we have one. But what's called horizontal reach is the issue, that where you can park a ladder truck and on the street of somebody's, or next to a driveway, and horizontally reach a structure, even if it's only 3 or 4 stories high. And we kind of lose sight of that sometimes in the rural area, that we don't have a lot of commercial buildings. So that always to kind of assume you need a 100-foot ladder to get a 7-story building up is really not the case in most cases in this area.
And we have to stay out of collapse zone, too.
Right, it's a horizontal reach. A lot of driveways we can't get into, a lot of driveways or homes are off the roadway and beaten path. And many times we can reach the house, either ventilated or do some work in the house from the street at a low angle, maybe 20 or 30 degrees and not 85 degrees. So,
And that was
you
another
always
recommendation.
kind
So
of-
some of the recommendations from emergency vehicle response. They noticed that a lot of our houses are built on slopes, and we're never going to get a tower ladder on the back of a house. We have one 4-wheel drive vehicle, and that's not it. And so they noted a deficiency in ground ladders. Firefighters are going to have to do this the old-fashioned way. They're going to have to carry ladders in and set them up. That's additional space. That's additional size. That's more gear that the trucks have to carry. Yes, Jennifer.
So I assume at some point you're going through the financials, and so the $14 million bond, is that both for the building and for the
It's actually gone.
equipment?
It's actually gone up.
Or whatever the number is.
Yeah,
Is
it's-
it for the trucks and the building?
No,
Or it's just the building?
Those
it's
are
for the,
good.
it's for the purchase of the land, it's for the renovation of this building, which we can do with a different length bond, so that price will drop. It's for everything else. It's for furniture, sprinkler systems, alarm system, cabling, training fees for professional fees, bond counsel, regular attorneys. It covers everything that we've spent up to date on this project, which is in the excess of $300,000. Most of that, large measure, engineering fees because of the planning board. So that's soup to nuts, and that includes, what's the percentage on our overage? The contingency?
It's only the 3% contingency.
3% contingency. So the number which is now
It's 15 and more.
15 what? You said it to me.
But how do you identify the trucks?
We have capital reserve funds. We put money away. We have capital reserve funds for building, we have capital reserve funds for trucks. Because our capital reserve funds were established prior to the change of the law in 2007, we're grandfathered in. In 2007, the state of New York passed a series of new laws covering prior business. One of which was if you develop a capital reserve fund, once you put a dollar in there, it stays there for the specific purpose for which it was earmarked. We don't have to do that. For example, we have money in our capital reserve fund for buildings right now. I don't know what the number is, so don't ask me, but we have money there which we are keeping there because if this bond referendum doesn't pass, we're going to have to keep maintaining this sort of aging infrastructure. We had to replace the boiler a couple of years ago, maybe it's an old building. If the referendum does pass, we're not going to need a couple $100,000 for building maintenance, because we're going to do it all at once to bring everything up to, the current standards. And so then we can move that money into our capital reserve trust funds, so we can do that. What did 144 cost, John?
144 is approximately $525,000.
Okay, that was a number of years ago. That those prices are going up, but we will have the money, and we've done that over time. The previous boards of the fire district before I got here, I would characterize as overly responsible. If you look at our budgets over time, they don't always go up. They don't always account for inflation. They don't always account for cost of living increases. In years where the boards thought that they didn't need the same money they had before, they've actually reduced their budgets. But in large measure, they've done a good job of funding our capital reserves. Now, of course, we're hamstrung by the 2% cap, which is not really a 2% cap. There's a formula based on what's going on out there financially. Nancy knows this better than I do. This year, how much?
0.68.
0.68 was the amount of increase we were allowed to levy without going past the cap. Now, the Board of Fire Commissioners can bust the cap. We don't have to bond this at all. If we want to, we could just increase taxes by 300%, 10, 100, whatever the number is, and just issue a severe tax levy in 1 year if the majority of the board felt that it was appropriate to do so. A majority of the board does not feel that it's appropriate to do so. And so we think spreading it out over a longer period of time is a better way to do it. Yes, I'm sorry, we haven't met. My name's Chris.
I'm Karen.
Hi, Karen, nice to see you.
How many municipalities within Westchester have undergone a modernization?
I know what you mean.
Because I know Scarsdale did, extensive to their police station and fire station. Do you know of any other municipalities who have gone through?
Well, Millwood, I went through by saying Scarsdale because we're in a different, we're in the town of Newcastle. We're Newcastle
No,
Fire
I'm just
District
saying
one.
within
But,
Westchester.
yeah, well, Millwood is completing one now, and if anybody gets a chance to go see what they've done compared to what they had, go look. They've done a terrific job. And I was talking to Hala and Greg Santone, the chief down there, and they said it was really sort of remarkable that as soon as they had this structure open, and it wasn't even finished, the firefighters are spending time there, they're bringing work there, they're working there, they're having more events there, they're getting more people approaching them about volunteering, just because it's a nicer place to be.
So did Armonk do the same thing?
Armonk built, go ahead, Bob, we're talking about Armonk.
So I was there. So that was done in 2002, and and when it was first built, people thought it was too large. And if you went back 2 or 3 years later and walked through the apparatus page, you would see that it was occupied. We tried to design a building to grow into, not out of. You're far better off having the same building usable for generations than having to replace it in 30 years.
So maybe the question is to you, how many fire departments have you done within Westchester that are under these plans or completed?
Well, Peekskill is out to bid right now. I did a modest project in Ossining, Briarcliff Manor. I can't remember the name of the station.
So there are fire departments which need to be modernized.
Yes, I'm talking to Bedford Hills right
It is an
now.
aging fire departments, so it's nothing out of the norm.
Well, let me tell you that, okay, I'm doing work in the city of Philadelphia. More than the average age of their stations is 57 years, which means probably 75% of their stations will not fit a modern truck properly. And you see this kind of thing going on where they have to fold the mirrors in to get the truck in. Now, if there's an alarm and you want to go, the last thing you want to do is pull the truck out, get out of the truck and reset your mirrors, and then come back in the truck and go. Okay. And I see this kind of thing everywhere. Because, as I mentioned, I've done 200 of these. I go into existing stations where if you get out of the driver's door and you want to go around the passenger side, you have to exit the building and come around and come in a door on the other side because they've strapped a tire on the rear bumper so when they touch the back wall, they know they're in, and that way the front door will clear the front bumper. So these are, they're hazardous buildings, and they don't allow, you see here, this is a very important piece of equipment right here, this hose. This attaches to the tailpipe and takes away the carcinogenic byproducts of combustion. Many, many stations, the ceiling's too low to allow that. I don't want to name the names of these clients because it's embarrassing for them. One of my clients has multiple stations. In one station alone, 3 firefighters developed the same kind of cancer. This is not just, rolling dice and it just happened to fall that way. These are exposures. So, what? I don't know if I answered your question. I know it's happening all over. I'm talking to Bedford Hills right now. We have approximately a dozen projects that we're working on today, from Nantucket Island and Hyannis, and Newton and Amherst and Lewiston, Maine. All these places that they're confronting this problem. And the small communities, it's worse. The grandparents built the station. They got together and built the station. And they have an emotional attachment to it, but it doesn't work.
Actually, this might be good too. Can I just say one quick thing first? Since Jennifer brought up numbers. Currently, the tax rate for the fire district in Newcastle is 2.364 per thousand. If this passes, is this okay? Can I do the same? I'd like to do the same.
Should I jump right to that part when we come back?
The increase would be in the neighborhood of 1.197%. But yeah, why don't we jump to that point?
You're going to come back to this subject?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll come back.
Yes, I certainly want to go back to that other stuff to explain why it's as big as it is. So I've done a lot of stations. Everyone's talking about it. I mean, to the public, so they get into it and they see it and participate in it. So especially if they participate in the life of the building, meaning with the firefighters in the building, then they understand the reason for it. And that's part of what I want to be able to talk about a little bit. These are the dollars. The purchase of the land, which was 1.6 something.
Yeah.
The raw cost of the land. There's remediation and demolition. There was a fair bit of planning board cost, and then the station itself, the renovation and addition, including all the soft costs, is 12.7. And the soft costs include, remember the picture of the air filling station? That kind of stuff. Firematic equipment. There's going to be a decon laundry. So the washing machine is a $12,000 washing machine. It's just the way these things are. It has to take that one it takes 65 pounds dry worth of stuff in it. And it has to wash it, and it can't damage it. These things have, they're robust and all that, but there's very delicate membranes in between the layers that you can't spin it too high a G-force or you'll tear it apart and it'll cease being safe for the firefighters. So these are sophisticated pieces of equipment. There's a lot of that stuff in it. There's probably $300,000 worth of that kind of stuff that's part of occupying the building and getting it ready for service. Okay, the tax increase for the average home is going to be $215.56. I'm going to tell you how we got to we're making an assertion that we know what the average home is. I'm going to talk about that.
Excuse me, isn't it better if you tell us what the increase is per $1,000?
That is the number that Chris just recited.
This is the 16th. Is that number changed?
This is,
It was 3 days ago.
no, it changed because we got the last of the site work costs. I don't have that number, but it was 1.197 is a little higher than that now, like 1.22 or something per thousand.
That's the increase
That's the
over
increase.
the existing two.
So like for a homeowner, you know, when I see my tax bill, it says for, you know, fire department,
Yeah.
it says this much times my assessed value.
Right.
So you're saying that number is what?
Like $2 per thousand times your assessed value. Let's come to the next slide. Okay, here's what this said. We got a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet of all the properties, and they're sorted by property type. And Excel has a very simple function to take an average of those numbers, right? Just take that column numbers on the averages. So there were 2,791 residential properties, and the average of that all was 180,000. Now, the assessed value is not the market value, I think. Maybe it doesn't understand that. The equalization rate here is approximately 20%. So the market value is theoretically 5 times the assessed value, round numbers. So if you have a house, you know, that's 180, well, it turns out that for that number, it's 215. So if you take the two numbers and then divide one into the other, right? 180 times something equals $215.
So I multiplied 2791 properties times the 215, right?
No, that's not what you multiply.
Well, if you're saying that the average cost per house is $215.
Oh, you're saying in terms of the revenue needed each year?
Yeah, and there's 279 properties and that's the average.
There's also commercial
Yeah.
properties
Okay.
that are not part of that.
I'm getting $600,000 a year, so that's,
We are,
For debt service?
the debt service,
so I'm timing
debt-
that by how many years for this bond?
the debt service is
Two bucks.
the debt service is in the order of magnitude of 900,000 a year, and then it drops after 16 years or something like that to a lower number.
Because
Well, it's not actually gonna,
Well, no,
Yeah, tax on
no, it should, because we're allowed to float two bonds, two separate accounts. A shorter, correct me if I'm wrong, we can do a shorter bond on the renovation or portion of it, we break it into two different projects.
Right.
The longer bond would be on construction. So once the servicing the renovation bond will be finished in 15 years. And so that number will end, and so that we can reduce that number, so we're only servicing the longer term, 25 or 30 year bond.
okay, so our taxes are going up like this much for 15 years.
And then coming down
Then
this
they
one.
come down for
Yeah.
the next 10 or so
Yeah,
years, and then the
exactly.
next 7 years.
Well, your fire
And then-
taxes,
and
your
then-
fire taxes, I don't know about the rest.
Well, I
of
know,
it,
but
so-
then the next 7 years, you know.
Correct.
there you go, right?
Correct. The entire process is 26 years. So after about the 16th year, it drops for the final 10 years by, if it was 215, that we came up with, it drops by about $40. These are round numbers. I'd be happy to generate a table. The thing is, the fiscal advisor just went on vacation, and I don't feel that, you know, I shouldn't be saying these numbers, the fiscal advisor should. That's what they get paid to do. So, but those are good approximations.
Okay, and you said earlier that you're gonna talk about how you thought this is going to work for 100 years, right?
Yeah, I'm happy to go back to that point.
Because I can't figure out how in 1916, anyone would have had a clue of what would have been needed 100 years from then. I don't have the same idea now.
Okay, so one of my favorite projects that I had was a fire station built in 1913. It was one of those buildings that's, you know, extraordinarily beautiful. They came to me and they said, for its 100th birthday, we want to plan for the next 100 years. So it's, you know, these things are doable. The doors were too small. So part of addressing that, we had to find an adjacent space for the trucks and then find other purposes and move it into the spaces where the trucks used to be. So now, and this space is a good example because in the new scheme, this forward portion of it is going to be where the antique is, the antiques are, and the rear portion is going to be where the sleeping quarters are. So this will be viably usable space, and the new addition will have 14-foot high doors by, it's 13'4", not 14 feet wide. That's another, you know, basically it's a 14 by 14 open.
I have a question. Why would we be keeping the antique
fire trucks if they're not needed to fight fires?
It's part of the
It's
spirit of our organization. The volunteers are bound together by their comradeship and their commitment to service of the community. And every department that I know owns certain things that their forebears
memorabilia.
used. It's a memorabilia, and they take great pride in it. And when, somebody mentioned you mentioned Millwood, people walk in and join. I was, skating out in West New York, I did their station, and at the ribbon cutting, some teenagers walked by and they said, "Can we come in?" And I happened to be the guy standing by the door, so I got to give them a tour. And at the end of me showing them around, they said, "How do we join?" Now, all through the country, the conversation is recruitment and retention, the aging out of the fire departments. I go to departments where the average age of the firefighter is 47 or 50. They're going to be in deep trouble in 10 years if they can't bring in young people, because the cost of having a paid department starts at $2.5 million a year, and then you get 4 people showing up. You don't get a crew of people showing up. So, so if there's a small museum here, the Peekskill station, the front lobby is going to be a museum. They have an 1832 hand pumper, and they've got the 1870s hose wagon, which is silver plate and bevel mirrors, blood red lanterns, and that's going to be in there. And the firefighters are very proud of that stuff, and they're proud to be part of that tradition with the silver trumpet. Somebody's going to polish that trumpet, and it's going to be on display.
I'm happy that you just mentioned the subject of the number of people who show up to actually man apparatus. I've been hearing numbers like we're planning for 100 years, we're going to be paying for this for 30 years, we're going to be paying for that for 15 years. Is there anybody who honestly believes 15 years from now we're still going to have a volunteer fire department here? And what size fire department do you think we're going to have here to man all this apparatus that's filling all these bays?
We're not increasing the number of apparatus that we have already. In fact, we decreased when we got rid of the last pension, we didn't replace it. So we're not increasing the number of apparatus. We're just moving everything that we have already into one place. I mean, at some point, that's going to have to be replaced, right? We agree on that. So we know, but we're not going to keep that and add something to it.
I see a tanker in one of the bays that we don't have.
Right.
We don't own a tanker.
Oh,
There's a tanker in one of the bays.
that hasn't been decided by the truck committee or anybody else. That's a different conversation.
That's to be determined. So the EVR study said that the station should plan for 5 pieces of equipment, 8 pieces of equipment. And that's exactly what this is. This will hold 5 pieces, and then there are 3 in the existing lower bays. So,
Not fire, it's only.
so, you ask a question that I don't think can be answered. Will there be volunteers in the future? Well, so this is all I do for a living, right? So I go to all the conventions with the guys, and they believe that there will be. And so, where was I just the other day? It was some, they believe that there will be. And in any event, the building, you'll still need to provide fire protection and life safety protection. A lot of the calls are becoming EMS calls and car crashes and so on. Somebody needs to get there and help. And so if 50 years from now, certain parts of this building seem a little too big because there aren't volunteers anymore, then some other function will fill that space. It'll have a roof over it, it'll be heated and cooled, it'll be dry, it'll have electrical outlets. We're not building a wasteful quantity of space. I know everybody thinks that with every one of these projects. But, I can walk you through, and part of the PowerPoint is to walk you through the spaces and how we got to decide what they are. So if this is a good time to go back and do that, I'm happy to do that. Is that
Why would we do that?
okay?
She's her hand up.
I'm sorry. Is that
I was just wondering if the number of volunteer firefighters per year is going up.
so we can have this additional space, because I'm a member of this department and I don't have any trouble getting around and getting dressed and stuff like that. And my other question was, training facilities. I was just wondering how many firehouses, volunteer firehouses in communities similarly sized have bailout facilities, mass confidence facilities for training.
All of them? Okay, well,
Because I was, in my experience, we've always wanted to train some
sure, sure. So, okay.
Four of our neighboring communities do have mass training facilities.
in bailout training facilities.
Yeah.
Can we just borrow theirs?
Borrow theirs, that's not an emergency training, is it? I mean, it's a part you guys would like to know what to train rather than have one here?
But that increases our response time by 20 minutes. If we have a call.
And one thing I'd like to point out, these elements of training are not particularly expensive. There's a storage mezzanine, and we take a section of the, instead of having railing, we put up a block wall with a window frame. There's your bailout window. In that mezzanine, we take a section, we frame out a square, and we put a manhole in. As far as the mass confidence, there's nothing that we're building. It's parts and pieces that they make out of 2x4 and tubing and pieces of plywood. But having the mezzanine allows them to go someplace off the apparatus floor to do the exercise. Every fire station that I do has it. Now, so I'm lecturing next week at a national conference on fire station design. The only reason I'm telling you that is that I go to places where everybody gets together and talks about this. Everybody who is there is doing this. Maybe we're all just sort of following each other in circles, and they might think that, but every fire station that's being discussed in these environments, and what this conference I'm going to is fire chiefs who are planning to build a fire station and want to know how do you do a good fire station. They come there, and guys like me lecture. I'm lecturing on your old fire station. Should you renovate it or tear it down? That's one. And the other is, how do you combine fire and police with them avoiding fights, basically? Okay. Other people, one guy lectures on his training features, one guy lectures on controlling the contaminants in the building, somebody lectures on gender issues in fire station design, somebody lectures on what's the best kitchen. I mean, it's a variety of things. And the people who come are all very committed to the idea that training takes place in the building. NFPA actually requires that 20% of the practical training that you do is supposed to be in the building. So that's all.
Well, I would actually argue, like, as a firefighter here, that I don't all the time feel safe coming back from a call when 120, you see how the cars speed up and down 120, they're turning from 3 different directions, and when we pull a fire apparatus to get back into this building, we are expected to get out of the truck while other cars and people that live in this town are trying to get by the trucks as you're getting out of the truck. And on more than one occasion, dozens of occasions, I've gotten out of this car, I've opened the cab and have someone, a driver, start yelling at me about getting out. So you want to talk about being unsafe? This is unsafe the way it is. So the new building is going to have drive-throughs so that the truck can actually pull right in. So as far as being a firefighter, I would say maybe there's some things that are fine around here, but I would say the majority of them is antiquated and needs to be redone. So, we're the ones that are coming out in the middle of the night. We're the ones that are coming out in the middle of the day. We want to be safe coming to this building.
Right. And,
So.
and I believe it because I see it. And so, because this is all I do, right? I'm sort of a junkie about this stuff. I get news feeds on my computer from several services related to fire. And every day, there's a firefighter somewhere getting killed by a car running into him or the truck crashing or something like that. It's astonishing. So we need to do what we can. Yeah.
Do other neighboring firehouses have drive-through?
Armonk does?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where else?
Well, Millwood doesn't need it because they're off,
Right.
they're not on the, what our guys do is when they come back, they take the trucks and they pull across 120.
There's no
And
question
they back
that's
in.
better. However, what about Bedford Hills? What about Valhalla?
Well, let me talk about Bedford Hills. They called me last week. They would like to meet with me. They want to do
Did
something.
they just redo theirs?
I don't know.
Oh, it's pretty new. But I'm asking, what, I agree.
Tony has drive-through.
I agree.
Tony has
you can do it. If you can do it, it's the preferred thing to do because it's safe. In the case of Millwood, they've got this enormous apron, nobody can run into it. Peekskill was, in the original design, had drive-throughs. This was 2009, and Peekskill's a funny story, but the building was designed in 2009, and then political problems happened, and now it's getting built. And they did a lot of trimming to get there, and to absorb 6 years worth of inflation. And the drive-through bays were removed. It's not a good idea, but they happen to be on a very wide street. It's on, what's it called? Main and Broad Street. So it's a little better, but I don't think under any condition people should have to back in. So let me just take you through one little set of diagrams here to just talk to that one thing. And then can we do that?
Question about the same issue. So in Millwood's previous firehouse, they had a traffic light that would turn red. They still have it, even though they're down the driveway, but they had a traffic light that would turn red when the truck was returning, just so that people could get off without the risk of.
Well, there is.
The recommendation from EVR is that we do both.
Yeah.
Right? Right? The recommendation from EVR is that we do both.
Yeah.
Belts and suspenders, we had the drive-through and traffic control up here and back there.
Yeah.
That's their
Yeah,
recommendation.
traffic control is important because there are too many adolescents
Until someone gets
driving
killed.
cars. And they just, they figure they can sneak through before,
It's not the adolescents.
No, the one I saw Memorial Day was
full grown.
full grown. Yeah, no white BMW, so she didn't have to stop.
Okay, so these are the properties.
Shout out, did the planning board have something to say about drive-through or?
Well, they were very much in favor of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so here's, this is how it fits on the property. The red box on the left is existing property. This is the to be acquired property. And then the way this is set up to work, let's see, get quick once more. Okay, here we go. One more. I can never remember. There, okay. So here's a truck, here are trucks coming out onto King Street, right? And when they return, they come down Memorial Drive, turn, and go into the building. So there's no exposure for them. Now, these existing bays over here are still going to have to be back in bays, but these are going to be second to trucks, meaning trucks that are used far less often. We couldn't solve everything without demolishing everything. And when we ran numbers on, the planning board asked us to go through a lot of exercises, can you move this and move that? You understand that's how planning board is. So one of the things we had to do was lay out what a brand new building would look like. And the brand new building was $2.5 million more than renovating, or maybe it was $4 million. It was a big number. And the other problem with doing that is that it would have meant they'd have to vacate the site completely during the construction process, and they don't have any place else to go. So we have this set up along this line. You build the new, you move into the new, you renovate the old. I've done this, remember this lecture I did next week, renovation. So that will work. Okay, let me go back and talk about how we determine what spaces we need. And that doesn't take very long, but really to see and understand, because, if you don't do this every day, you don't know why you need any of this, right? Just like you wouldn't have a foot doctor replace your hip, you would go to somebody who knows all the small points about the surgery. If you're going to have a fire station, you need to understand all the small points, or otherwise, it all seems arbitrary and capricious. And people think it's all about what the firefighters want rather than what they need. So I want to talk about how we came to the point of deciding what the parts and pieces were. We go through this process called programming. We talk about the essential features that they need or want, or feel they should have for decontamination, for storage, for clean treatment of the air masks, for storing the turnout gear, for training, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we get together, I have a large binder, and there are these tabs for all the different kind of rooms. For each tab, for each type of room, there's pictures of rooms and floor plans of the rooms And they can say, well, you know, when we do that, we want 2 people in there, and we want to store the following things in there. And the process for us is when you get off the truck, you go and you do this, and then you do that. So we go through all the spaces in the room, in the building, one by one, and we show what's in that space, the equipment, the size, and here's a decon laundry, there's the washer extractor, the drying cabinet, and so on and so forth. And so at the end of the day, if they say our decon laundry this is 133 and 104, so that's 237 square feet is what it takes to do that, they know why it's 237 square feet. And they can explain to somebody else. As part of the document, there's a lot of text that explains what's wanted in each space, and the commissioners, and Chris really organized the conversation, wrote down for every space what they felt they needed, and as an introductory to me sitting down with them. And then we ended up with each room defined, and we ended up with spreadsheets that showed all of the spaces and the numbers. Now, to give you a sense of how particular everything is, this is a floor plan of a decon laundry. It's from a different project. And for every one of these rooms, we will eventually have these kind of diagrams where every piece of equipment is shown, and every one of those pieces of equipment has a number tag. So in the plan, that reflects, that represents that, which represents a piece of data on a spreadsheet, which represents a manufacturer's spec data, which represents a piece of equipment. Nothing's arbitrary. And there's, of course, I'm not going to say trust me. I'm going to just say every space that's in this building has been evaluated at that level so that we know that it's needed. Okay, so now we're back to what we just saw. So let me talk about the floor plan. Okay, this is the first floor. This red box covers the 1950 building. The second box covers the 1970s addition. And so everything to the right of that is what we're talking about building. And if I were designing a new station on a new piece of land, it would never look all strung out like that. But we don't have any option here. This is the shape of the land, the topography of the land, it runs uphill. Okay, so what's in here? What kind of things are in here? These areas that are highlighted are the apparatus bays, primary firematic response. On either side of them, there are spaces where we have support. This is the turnout gear room. The first responders park here. They flow into the building, grabbing their turnout gear, and take it into the bay. On this side, we have decon laundry. We have a mechanics room. We have the fill station for breathing air, which has the sink for washing the masks and all of that kind of stuff. There's janitor's closet and storage, and this is the radio room, communications room. Here's where we have bunking. Here's the museum that I mentioned earlier. And this is a day room for the bunkers. And you don't know who's going to be in there. In a number of the departments that I work with, they develop a bunking in program with a local college. There's a lot of people who grew up in the fire service, starting as cadets when they were 12. And they're off in college, and they would be thrilled to get to go to bed every night at the fire station in response for being a responder. And I've done one next to Cornell University. It's very common there. It's common throughout Pennsylvania and Maryland. It could happen.
Maybe this is not particularly relevant, but if these are volunteer firemen, people who don't necessarily live in the firehouse, what are they bunking? How do you
Storm coverage.
Well, we have people that sleep in the firehouse quite often. When we have storms, the snow last year, when we have events like Sandy, this building is fully staffed.
Okay.
That's the only time
preparatory.
Right now, we're sleeping on the floor.
Yeah.
We used to have army cots, not terribly comfortable. Also, if you put 15 or 20 adults in one room, it's not the best sleeping environment in the world. If it's dormitory style, we have now purchased some aero beds, but yeah, we have people sleeping. And there is a possibility in the future, to the point that was raised earlier, You know, I've been hearing, you know, this is gonna be a paid department since I came on board. It's been 9 years. People have been talking about this for 30 years. But if someday we may need to hire daytime drivers or something like that, we may need sleeping facilities. All this space, though, is designed the way it is now to meet the needs of the district now. It can be moved. We can move walls. We can change things, but we can't change exterior. So what we did is when we went through our programming, which we went through, I don't know, 5 or 6, I don't know how many times we went through it. You know, we threw stuff out. We said, no, that's a luxury. We don't need that. We can't afford that. We do need, you know, I mean, and bunking spaces, secure bunk spaces, we thought was one of the things that we did.
Essentially, bunk room is from this column, or from this?
Well, it's behind this,
Well,
behind this door line.
And this room goes back, and this
And
wall
into
goes
there,
back.
into what's currently the commissioner's room.
So it's not really essential space.
No, they're not big. I mean, these meet the minimum dormitory standard. They're typically doubles. I think 1 or 2 of them are singles because of the way it's laid out. Did you want to comment on that?
No, I started.
Yeah.
Do people ever combine vehicles in the bays? Like I'm looking at the smaller trucks in the 70s edition. And, you know, after you come back from the fire, time is not that much of an issue. So if you have all this asphalt in front of the building, all this asphalt behind the building, couldn't you double park those things in one day? Like what I'm going toward is, if this building has so many issues, you know, and the second you touch it, I have an architecture degree, so I get this. Not that I do that anymore, but once you touch a building, yeah, you have to bring it up to code, so this place is a disaster, with ADA and all that, I get that. But I feel like, couldn't you more concisely deal with the programming in the new building and potentially sell this piece along with Center Street?
Planning board had the same question.
I mean, it's just, I cannot sit here, and I appreciate everything that you're saying with the programming and having gone through more door schedules and things like that than I care to remember. I get all the equipment and everything, but I look at that site plan and I sit there and I say, it is huge. I just cannot understand how it couldn't be more.
Well, there's no point in
efficient.
there's no point in selling this because everything that's down Center Street has to come up here. So that, and really most of what's coming from Center Street will be right here in terms of the hose carriage and the old engine. The boat itself we're putting down there.
But I mean, like, couldn't you, you have 7 trucks.
I'm
The
sorry?
coordination of
Yes,
all our
that
services in one location.
I don't
Well,
understand.
how many do you have to Center Street? How many do you have here?
We have 2 vehicles. We have 2 vehicles down there. One's a utility
And then, so how
van.
many are you housing here, in that main house?
We're
And
not-
the new,
At the moment, we're not adding any. Everything we have now will be here. We're not adding a piece of apparatus. We have room to add a piece of apparatus.
But then-
Or instead of that, instead of keeping our chief's cars during a storm outside in the weather and on the apron, we can put them inside.
but the new building can house how many
Okay,
vehicles?
the new construction here, this is the new bay, okay? And it's shown right now with 4 pieces. They can take a 5th piece, and you could scooch in a chief's car behind the ladder.
But, so you do need to keep the 70s building because
Yeah,
you need that
absolutely.
space for the
Yeah.
that
I think the only way to achieve what she was suggesting was that idea of knocking everything down and building an efficient rectangle. And then the site plan would make sense. Everything would make sense. You know, I look at architecture magazines and you see all the time, everything looks just so. And then when you drill down in, you see the compromises they made in the program of the building to get it to look like so. We don't have that luxury here.
But the other problem is, I think, is if we could do that, if we could carve this out, do a subdivision and sell this, we're going to lose our parking.
Right, I'm going to get.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at it and I see opportunities to change it. Obviously, you have to shift things and move things around. I just want to know, like, has that been explored?
Oh,
Yes, we have an architect on the planning board.
Yeah, Mr. Curley.
Tom Curley was terrific.
Required us to do a whole pile of different designs.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, he finally said, okay, I get it. Because your reaction is, if I walked in the room and knew nothing about how it got to that, I would say that's a convoluted plan. But we drew at least 4 separate schemes for him. And then he finally said, okay, I get it. The most sensible
Someone's changed.
plan was a new building, knocking all this down and throwing away the valuable asset. Now, remember, I'm doing this lecture, do you renovate it or knock it down? What I have learned is if you have a sound box that's essentially on an XY grid, nothing's skewed and cockeyed, right? You're all set. Work with it. Because there's so many functional spaces that don't require what this truck requires, that are part of being a fire department. And, yes.
Yeah, this is about the bunking area. Just wanted to correct some information from before. You mentioned that the building is often occupied at night.
No, I said during storms.
You said it's often occupied at night.
No, I said during storms, especially events. We've had people here overnight.
Right. Yeah, I was a member for almost 7 years of this department. I think I stayed here overnight maybe 4 or 5 times in 7 years. During those nights, people weren't attempting to have a comfortable night's sleep. People were out answering calls, which is the whole point of being here overnight. So just to correct that.
Yeah, last year when we had the snowstorm, we didn't get a single, we were pretty well staffed, we didn't get a single call. I mean, thank goodness, but, so.
Right. So it wasn't necessarily.
Right. Well, so that's a good point, and it's also one of these questions of, does that beg the issue? If we provide this, it will be used, and there will be people in the building to respond promptly. And so,
How do you know that? How do you know that?
from the buildings I've done, where they say that was a good idea, we use them.
Do you have any examples?
Oh, you mean Kingston, Pennsylvania? All right. Kingston, Pennsylvania, it's happening currently in Hyannis, where they have a blended department. They have call people and paid people, and this will allow the call people to sleep there.
So they do have paid employees.
In the case of Hyannis, they have a blend of what they call people. In New England, they're call people. They're not full-time employees. Every time they come to fight a fire, they get a certain amount of money.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
On the subject of bunk rooms, not if, but when this has to become a paid fire department. Paid firefighters don't work 8-hour shifts. They have to, first of all, they'll be here 3.5 hours a day with nothing to do except training and cleaning. But they are going to be sleeping in the firehouse, there's no question, because they're going to be here on 24-hour shifts most likely. Because that's typical for a firefighter shift. 24 on, 48 off. They don't work 8-hour, 40-hour weeks. So a bunk room, if we don't need to use it because we don't have any snowstorms in 2016, it's going to be needed certainly before the 15-year first mortgage gets paid off.
Right.
Because
I agree.
the department in here is going to need it.
Peekskill's an interesting model. They have paid drivers, and everybody else is a volunteer. And this is something that is a transitional step that communities go to. And that may be something you're doing in 20 years or 15 years. We can't tell. The one thing I have confidence in is that if the station speaks to what the firefighters need, both emotionally, to be part of this organization and to train, they'll be here. All these stations that we do, we put in office space. All of a sudden, guys are in there doing office work. Right now, they have to do it on their kitchen table at home. Whatever it is they're doing for the department, they do it on their kitchen table at home. If they start doing it in the building, somebody else sees the lights are on and they come over. Yes.
So a couple minutes ago, you just said you can't tell what the staffing would be like in 15 to 20 years. So I'm just wondering, if given that, how you'd be able to predict what the circumstances would be like 100 years from now, which is what you're predicting.
Perfect question. So I can't. But what I can predict are the following things. 14-foot apparatus bay door will still work, because in order for it not to work, they're going to have to tear down all of the highway infrastructure in the country and rebuild it higher and wider. And that's not happening. The floors are being designed so you can easily put a 100,000-pound truck on. Trucks aren't going to, you know, if you start getting 100, okay, so the heaviest ladder trucks or heavy rescue trucks that I know about now are 70-some-odd thousand pounds, maybe 80,000. Most of the bridges, you see the big trucks that come through, they have escorts. Part of the escort isn't just to ward off other traffic, it's to be there in case there's a mechanical failure, a structural failure. So the apparatus bay floor is capable of handling well over 100,000 pounds. That space will work. We have the supports for decontaminating things, for storing things. What could be different about that? Certainly things could be different about how people sleep and live, or how many papers get processed, or so there won't be any more file cabinets in 20 years because everything will be a PDF. These things won't make the entire design unusable.
There could be self-driving fire trucks in 100 years. There probably will be. You do not know what things will be like 100
You
years.
still need to have a fire truck in the space?
Misinformation to tell people that.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? How many people are typically on a fire truck to man it? What's the minimum you need to go out on a fire truck?
NFPA wants 4 people.
Okay, so unless 4 people are sleeping here, they still have to wait for the other 3 people to come, right?
No, not to drive the truck out the door.
But that has to be a driver that's sleeping here then, right?
Right. You can drive the truck to the scene. They can't go in the building and do anything until there are 4 people. Right?
Okay, so.
Am I correct?
Okay.
Tell me if I'm wrong. Okay.
So you need to, it's only going to work if at least 4 people are here at night. You're trying to build a momentum where 4 people would say.
You could have one driver here who
One-
goes and
yeah.
starts to set up, and the other people join him, and the driver is doing nothing until the other 3 people should come.
How many drivers are in the company of all the fire? What's the percentage?
Chief?
80 drivers?
Like how many drivers in this whole fire chapter volunteer program?
How many are certified as drivers?
The driver, my point being, you want to have the driver sleeping here because otherwise it's really an irrelevant point unless 4 people are here and one of them being a driver.
Well, also remember, the drivers have to be qualified under the apparatus. Just because someone's qualified to drive 155 doesn't mean they're qualified to drive.
Well, that even adds to my point. So now you've got people here who are sleeping and eating, but they might not be relevant unless.
Chris,
So
approximately
that came
1/3 of
from my
our
description about what goes on at peak scale. So I just want to be clear about that. That was told in the context of a partially paid department. There are paid drivers.
Right.
So in the case of peak scale, there's, I think, I can't remember any longer if it's 6 drivers on any shift or 8. But on each shift, there's 6 people who are certified to drive the different rigs. So 6 different pieces of apparatus can go out immediately. And then the volunteers will have to get there.
But Bob, Chief Maduro said he thinks approximately 1/3 of our members.
Approximately 1/3 of our
is
members
qualified
are
to drive.
drivers.
Right. So,
Okay.
but the issue I was talking about is something really for the future. When you find that you need to hire.
I think
your
that's the
first-
reality none of us want to face.
I know that. And you certainly don't want to face having the building designed so that when that happens, you now have to do something different to the building. Because especially if he's correct that it's happening within 16 years, you don't want to take a 16-year-old building and start ripping it apart.
May I add something to that? My name is Brian Jagoner. I'm one of the commissioners. I'm also one of the firefighters. I think we have 2 issues here. And again, at the beginning, I would like to say the board, and yes, I'm a member of it, has definitely done their due diligence. They've gone out, they've tried to examine the situation, everything from EDR to bringing Bob in, everybody else, and evaluating the situation. I have a slightly different take on it. And Bob, you want to pretty much finish with your, because
No, this is I guess explain what's the board line.
we have 2 issues. We have property next door, which we would be doing the community a disservice by not purchasing, doing all the everything necessary to demolish the building and make that part of Newcastle Fire District number 1. It'll guarantee us, no matter what happens in the future, we will always have and ability to expand. Okay, no matter what happens. Now, everything that has been presented today, for the most part, I do agree with. But here's where I differ. As it's been brought up, the needs of the future are completely unknown. Bob is absolutely right. Bridges at a minimum have to be built to 14 foot. The width of the roadways are all at the 10-foot minimum. Absolutely. The trucks are not going to get higher and wider. They're going to get heavier. They're going to get more complex. How many people in here, in this group attended here today, would like to be a firefighter, a volunteer firefighter? Take over 110 hours of your time while you're working full-time, working in the house to become firefighters. So now we have to look at what you don't want to look at. People are not willing to become firefighters in this community. It really is tough. If you're the doctor, you're the stockbroker, you're the dentist, you're the lawyer, you're the full-time mom with 3 kids running around doing everything. I don't know how you do it because the kids outnumber you. That is our reality. So now this is the reality you do have to face. This is a great idea, but I personally don't believe this is the best idea for right now. We should buy the property. We have the plans that are available, and maybe in 10 years, 5 years, 2 years, we can implement it. We may run into a situation where we become a paid fire department, and we have to do shared services with another municipality. This may not be the place that's necessary. This may not be the place that they turn out of. In that case, all our property, we can sell that. We have an asset. We will never lose what we put into the property next door. When we buy that property, if we have to sell it, we will not lose. The fire district will not lose. If it comes to fruition that, yes, we are getting volunteers. The demographics are changing. We're getting younger members. We're all getting older. As Bob explained, we are aging out. We need younger people. We need the Greg Langs to come up and be our chiefs and our future leaders and everything. But without that, we do have to face the reality. We might become a paid fire department. So do we have to build right now? No. But we should keep that option open. And I hope everybody keeps open the option for purchasing that property, because that would be a complete, letting that go, not following through with that, we would be doing a disservice to the community.
Yes, sir.
So, if I'm hearing you correctly, why not do a bond referendum just to buy the property?
Well, the Brian's right in some respects, and I think often I would rather specifically most. We intend to put out a 2-part resolution. The first one, Part A, asking for permission to bond out the purchase price, the purchase of the property, demolition of the building next door. If the answer to that on the cast your ballot is yes, we will then ask you the second question. May we also issue by bond for the additional $12 million to do construction now? People are free to say yes, buy the property, but no. I'm sorry, can I get through it? Okay, but don't do the effect response times to the detriment of our taxpayers. We look at Chapel Crossing, for example, huge piece of commercial land, already zoned for us, be great. Well, we provide fire protection on Apple Hill and Harts Gravel. Our response time is now gone. Forget about it. We're not going to be able to get to service those people. We're not even going to get to service our taxpayers over here. We look at the property behind us, which is owned by Don Roan. We have grading issues back there, and of course, Don's not going to give us a break on the sales price either. In terms of other commercial property, there really aren't a lot of options except for what we have right here. So, given that we know we are going to have to do this someday, and the RDA is 2024, this is optimum in terms of protecting the public fisc. If we don't build now, that means, of course, we're going to have to keep Center Street. So that would be $1 million or so based on our last appraisal. If we won't have, and we're going to have to keep maintaining that building, which is not prohibitively expensive, but we spend money every year on fuel, on repairs, and that sort of thing. With respect to 7% interest issue over the next 4, 5, 6 years. You're talking in a $3.6 to $4.4 million increase in construction costs when we actually do it. So our $15 million project just turned into a $19 million project or a $20 million project potentially. I mean, these are all things to consider. The public's going to have a choice. And then the public may just say, no, so, you know, get along the way. You can't get away with easy now. Yeah.
To respond, then by
Well, I don't want to.
No, by not doing the new construction, you're turning a proactive decision into a reactive. Given that there is expansion going on and more taxing on the firefighters, so in this case, if you don't do the expansion, essentially you're limiting yourself on the trucks that you can.
Well, we're gonna have to hold on to that one.
I don't want to get too deep into that, but there was also a recommendation. One of the trucks that was mentioned, 146, the size of that vehicle is almost an optimal size for this area.
I was talking about the residue, which we think will,
146.
no, the residue, which we think will have to be replaced.
Right.
And according to our chiefs, that's gonna have to be under design, because this is where we're at.
We will have to make compromises in that. But do we make a compromise in that? Do we work on the facade of the building? Do we make a $15 million decision that is going to be forever or for a very long time? And again, the needs change. We have to go to shared services. This may not be the place they turn out. We're still paying for it.
Yeah, but as
So
you
that's-
mentioned, again, you're turning a proactive decision, an investment decision to go and build that for the potential expansion based on a theory that you're going to pay, and you may not, and you have no, it's going back to the future. How can you go back to the future?
Okay, just to,
Okay, so I'm just-
no, I just said the purpose of this was supposed to be informational. There's been a lot of debates, a lot of discussions as to whether this is a good idea or a bad idea. You can come on either side of it. I mean, it doesn't matter. What we're trying to do today is educate people who seem to not know how we got where we are today. And I'm happy to have the debate with anyone at all, but we pay him by the hour. So if I can get him out of here, that would be great for me. I pay him by the hour. So let's not have the debate. Bob, can you finish this up so you can go on?
Great.
Thank you.
But could I just ask one question about, can you do a bond referendum just to buy the land and do a subsequent bond referendum when there's more information has been available to the public, more back and forth? It sounds like
Yeah.
not agreement on fire commissioners.
Well, there used to be,
I am
but
not agree.
Oh,
we
okay.
had a vote on this a couple of times. Yes, we could do that. We could do that, but we'd like to try it both ways. The time constraints we have with respect to going out to the bond is that if we miss our 18 months, we've lost our contract and property. Exactly. But we have another time constraint. As I said, we spent several $100,000 in architectural engineering fees, expert fees, environmental impact fees, and that sort of thing, in order to get planning board approval.
And how long was they good for?
18 months
Then you have to start over again.
from the beginning.
And then, it's no fun doing
Yeah.
I promise to be brief. Just a quick background and follow up with Chris. 2004, we started actually entertaining architects and speaking to a bunch of architects about this whole project. We looked at about 6 different options here. I was chairman of the board at the time. We looked at renovating the Center Street Firehouse. We looked at renovating this firehouse. We looked at another piece of property. We looked at the car wash over there. We looked at the veterans property, veterinarian's property, and we looked at the property across the street. Everybody we spoke to at that time, 6 or 8 architects, recommended we go next door and build over there. One of the primary issues, what was discussed earlier, was drive-through bays. And we actually went from there. The board discussed a number of different options what to do. That was the most feasible option for us to consolidate and to coordinate everything we have, all emergency services in one building.
Barry's absolutely right. Not only have we gone through several plans with this particular architect, we've gone through plans with other architects as well.
I've worked at a firehouse for 25 years that did not have a drive-through bay and was parked on Central Avenue in Hartsdale. Insanity is the only word I can describe of how it is. I am shocked that nobody got run over, killed, firemen or anybody else. That's one of the primary issues we went over in this property. We discussed renovating the existing building, but we wouldn't have drive-throughs. Almost every week or every 2 weeks, a firefighter in the United States is either run over or killed or seriously injured by a truck backing up over them falling off the step, them not realizing what's going on, running over themselves with the wheels, etc. It's the most dangerous things we do in the firehouse, going in and out, is backing up the fire truck. So to me personally, that was a primary concern, that we do something with drive-through bays, especially for the 3 primary pieces of equipment we have going out of this firehouse. And again, there's a lot of discussion about whether we should be doing this now. The trend in Westchester County right now, that I think there are 7 or 8 what's considered combination fire departments, which have some paid staff, whether the drivers or more, and volunteers. Except for the city, for example, Yonkers, Mount Vernon, New Rochelle, which are entirely paid. Everybody else is trending that way. I doubt very much if it comes to Chappaqua, we will have a fully paid fire department. We may trend in with drivers are partially paid, or a few people during the day. Real quick, LaGrangeville up in Dutchess County, because of the high concentration of IBM employees, was 100% volunteer. They went to 4 paid firemen during the day, from about 8 to 6, and they realized they needed additional personnel at night, and they continued that way. But they initially started off with about 4 paid personnel during the day, and that helped them out, again, because everybody was working.
Right, let's get back to the informational section.
Just one bit, I'm not disagreeing with the design. I'm just saying, I believe we can wait.
Right. Let's get through the how we got here, and then we can debate whether or not we should.
What's the outside look
Or
like?
should we?
I'm going to show you that though.
Oh, did we do the second floor yet?
We haven't gotten up to the first floor.
So why don't can we hold questions to the end, because we are going to do a Q&A. So
I'm taking myself off the clock, so he doesn't have to
There
worry
you
about
go.
it.
Well, it's not me, it's y'all. So I've been very much here.
Okay, so there's a mezzanine that sits over these spaces, and that mezzanine gives us the opportunity to training features that we talked about. Okay, now we get to the second floor, which sits over all of the first floor. And we've got the original 50s building, the 70s building, and then the addition. The addition has got, everything in red here is administrative space. Commissioner's meeting room, commissioner's office space, office for chiefs, and officers. They don't have those now. There's little places here and there to try and get work done. Okay, then we get over to the next thing. This is the firefighter's recreation space. It is basically the space that's upstairs now. There's some, the hallway behind it seems inordinately wide to me, so we made the room a little bigger, eating up some of the hallway. And then here we have the public space. Well, I call it public. It's meeting training. So if there's a department-wide meeting or it's available to the public, it's serviced by an elevator from the lobby. There's ADA compliant bathrooms. Every piece of it is compliant. Of course, the building is fully sprinkled. And then what else? There's an exercise room. Okay, so here's where we are with the changes. Right now, there's 17,000 square feet of space between Center Street and here. And there will be just shy of 30,000 square feet of space. So there's quite a bit more space. Okay, but again, the spaces are all accounted for. I'm going to show you where some of these spaces are. Okay. You've got spaces like we were in bunking, toileting. Did anyone peek in there when the door was open to the toilet? It's ridiculous. There's one toilet here, and there's a toilet upstairs.
Well, there's 2 restrooms upstairs, and that's
Right, but they're small, they're not ADA compliant. They don't have the proper number of fixtures. So that's, every one of these categories is where there's growth. There's growth in administration, firematic support, that's the rooms that have the breathing air apparatus and the decon and storage. You're all welcome to walk around the building after this and see where everything is crammed. So everything is accounted for, and very little of it is what we would consider pleasure space. There's an exercise room down Center Street. They're moving it up to here. Okay? So what are the percentages of the whole? The growth. Apparatus space, 18% of it. Firematic support space is 13% of the growth. 8% of the growth is administration, 9% is bunking, 5% is toileting, 4% is storage, 12% is training, 14% is circulation. Where's the other 17%? It's thicker walls. It's more walls. You don't have completely legal egress pathways in a lot of spaces in this building. It's stairwells and elevators, and then all the other little things that, like janitor's closet, housekeeping storage, things like that. That's what adds up to the balance of it. Yes.
To which category is the museum space applied?
We're calling it the historically significant storage. It's 468 at Center Street, and it's going to be 936 here, so it's 468 square feet of the growth. Which of these lines is it represented in? I don't remember. Oh, here, storage and support. No, I think it's part of that 17%. Okay, so this is the site plan, which you saw a colored version. As part of dealing with the planning board, there's something like 30 sheets of drawings like this that have been worked on and picked over. Part of what I want to talk about here is the ease of having an ADA compliant pathway for either handicap parking for people who aren't technically handicapped but would like a level walkway that's not very long into the station. Right now, people have to come home, assuming we didn't do this. I mean, right now, people come from here and they come over to here. So they have to cross the street, they have to climb a grade a little bit to get to here. So we're addressing that. So that's a 200-foot level walk, and that's a 540-foot walk. And it's only a 10-foot rise, so it's not a big deal. But it's going to be fully landscaped. The planning board, as you might well imagine, is very particular about things like landscaping and lighting. And okay, here's what we have now. And when we tear down the veterinarian's office, we're going to expand the building out, and it will look like that. And the goal was to not introduce a disparate kind of architectural style, but to carry the existing theme.
Question? Who did the secret review on this?
What do you mean?
Well, there was a secret.
Right. We were the lead agency.
Yeah.
And planning was involved. JMC Engineering did it. As part and parcel of that, we did a traffic study. We did downstream analysis for stormwater runoff. We did a runoff analysis. We had a tree survey. There was some question about, for example, the laundry, where we're going to be cleaning contaminated gear. Will the air going out be exhausted out through the vents? Will that pose a risk to the environment? So we had to check out and see about that. There would be drains underneath the apparatus in the new phase, the charcoal filter, but nevertheless, there was some concern about whether or not contaminants coming off the truck getting into the sanitary would be a problem. So we talked to the county about that. We talked to the waste facility down in Yonkers. They said no problem. We had to get signed off on that. With respect to landscaping, screening, lighting, and other issues, the planning board gave us some marching orders on that. So we've had many conversations and meetings with the planning board and our neighbor to the east, Greg Tarlock. What else did they make us do? They made us do a lot of stuff. They made us do a lot of stuff. So they were involved agency. We were the lead agency. At the end of the day, we issued a negative declaration. So the full impact statement has to be done.
So let me ask you this, as part of the secret review, there would be a visual environmental impact. It wasn't thought that this is too huge for the neighborhood?
The neighborhood, not so much. We don't think it is. In terms of neighborhood impact with respect to the surface, we've been able to solve that problem. The town has a policy where in the 100-year storm, we cannot increase either the volume or the rate of the flow of water off the property. And so working with the town, with Tom Curley, Dick, and Sabrina, we were able to solve that. So we were going to bring the trap and maintain water here, which we've been gently ease out. One thing that's worth mentioning, one of the reasons, well, I actually have
understand, everything that goes into the secret review, but the point I'm making is that is big. And so, it's hard for me to imagine, how does that fit into the neighborhood? I don't live next door or anywhere even, on this street, but, what do the neighbors, like the people next door, the person across the street, I mean, that is big.
Well, let me
And
tell you
to
what
me,
some-
that's an
let-
environmental impact.
Right, let me tell you what some of the alternative programs were. Before we entered into our contract, the owner next door had entertained 2 other contracts, both of whom wanted to put in affordable housing. And were willing to pay a premium for the property because, and I'll get these backwards, I usually do, but because the county provides monies to pay for land and the state provides money to pay for construction. As you know, the county's been running into some trouble with the HUD settlement that was entered into a number of years ago. What was planned, I can't remember if it was 50 units or something like that of low-income housing next door. That would have gone border to border. If you take a look at the plans that have been developed for the Hunts Place project, something like that, they got more room than that would have been bigger, much bigger. And before we actually had talked with a group, I don't know if you know Bill Spade, he's an architect. Yeah, Bill and Al Roberts came to us. They were looking at buying the property, but they knew that we had an interest in as well. We had several meetings with them, seeing if we could incorporate a way to do this. The lot next door is actually 2 lots, subdivided property. Is to be we took one and they took the other. But in terms of footprint, you weren't going to get anything smaller with that. The truth of the matter is that's a commercial property and it's got a value. Someone will buy it, someone will build something. It probably won't be as small as the animal hospital that's there. The fact that it's attached to this building and it's consistent architecturally, if you take a look at the roof line, you're not seeing a lot of shift. I think it's going to match. I think if it goes up, I don't think in 10 or 15 years you're going to be able to tell one part of it's new, one part of it's old.
There's no question, congratulations to the architect. It's definitely nice looking. I don't think anybody can doubt that. But it is so big. I just want to ask something else. First of all, I think the gentleman that spoke about purchasing the property,
Right.
I think you have to do that. That's my opinion. But at this point, of course, I went to your presentation in March, I think it was, and I asked you, what you have now, the apparatus, is it working? Are you able to service the community? You said yes.
I listened to the recording this morning. in preparation
Oh,
for
okay.
this.
So
Yeah,
that's what I said. So here's what I'm thinking. The veterinarian's hospital, all of these, I think it's very important that there be a decontamination area. I feel strongly about that for the volunteer firefighters. So why can't you renovate that building next door to do some of these things?
First of all,
The best building?
well, the cost of remediation of the poisons next door, the asbestos and the other poisons that are in that structure is going to cost us over $250,000. That's how bad it is. We of course have toured that building. And actually, as a result of that tour, we were the town came out and issued several violations of code that had to be done. That building is, I don't know, do you know when it was constructed? You know? It's been, I've been living in Chappaqua since 1967. The building's been there since long before I moved here. It doesn't make any sense to renovate that building. That building would best serve the fire department as a training exercise.
You could not use that.
Except it's too poisonous.
Yeah, just once, it would be one big drill, but they won't let us do that. But yeah, it doesn't make any sense to try to fix that and turn it into something usable for us. That doesn't make a lot of sense. But going back to the other point, yes, and I didn't mention the cost of construction over time is going to go up. I would remind people that we have right now where I guess could fairly be claimed historically low interest rates. So we have an opportunity to bond money at a very, very low rate. If that rate jumps up to 8%, 9%, as the Fed starts tinkering with it, as the economy comes back, we're talking about a lot more money. So, and these are all factors that we consider when we talk about We don't have a programming sheet. Programming sheet is about that pages and pages and pages, as Bob went through. Every room, every dimension. When we start saying, you know, that door, we can't build that door anymore because we're not getting, how much is the clearance, what do I need to swing the door?
We need the ANSI clearance for the door.
Yeah.
I took back 18 inches to the left of it.
We can't do that anymore. And we went through several steps. We went through it with our wish list. We did. And then we started cutting. We said, well, we don't need this, we don't need that, we don't need this. Now, I'm not here in this meeting to try to redesign or reprogram what we've spent dozens of hours doing. But we think we've gotten it down to where we can't cut anymore. Could we make the training room 10 feet narrower? Yes, we could, but why should we? We're gonna have people on site doing it now. Could we? I mean, and when we're done here, I want you to come in the commissioner's room. I want to show you the office that our treasurer and our secretary are trying to run a multi-million-dollar infrastructure out of. Not to mention all the legal requirements that we have to comply with. Just in terms of putting up notices for meetings such as this, it's very difficult. Our records are very hard to store. We're running out of space. We just bought new file cabinets. It's still not helping. We had everything scanned in going back to 1910 or whatever to try to just get rid of paper, but some things we can't. Some things we have to hold on to. So as we went through this program, we tried very hard to cut areas. We tried very hard to make things narrower. But you know, if we're going to open this building up to the public and we're going to have our public meetings upstairs on the second floor, we're going to need an elevator. And the elevators can only be so small. And I can't make that elevator small enough so it just takes one person in a wheelchair upstairs, because what if somebody at the meeting has a heart attack? Now I got to get a stretcher into that elevator. That elevator has to be a certain size. These are all things that we've considered. We really have. And I know it looks big. I know it looks really big. And you know, Mill would look really big. Armand looks.
Yeah, but that's very bad.
Well, you know, we can put trees or something, but you know, I mean, it just is what it is.
Chris made to make it clear. So, and Peekskill, it's been on hold for a year, and it went up $880,000 in that year, because you're at a period of